Back, Fact Finder is continuing to ask questions about sexual abuse allegations made against a former student ministries director at Eastminster Presbyterian Church in Wichita. Fact Finder investigator Dylan Domingue brings you the latest on the case.
The public only recently became aware of the allegations against Bodie Weiss after the church hired a third-party investigator last year to look into those allegations. That group, called Fact Finding Ministry, found there was a total of 23 victims. Now, Weiss died back in 2020, and this week Fact Finder spoke with law enforcement who confirmed they do not have a report made against Weiss on record. It's led to the question of why. If a third-party investigative group found there to be victims, why wasn't that information reported to police? I took that question to defense attorney Dan Monnet. To be clear, he is not associated with this case, but says it could come down to a state law known as the Mandatory Reporter Statute. In the state of Kansas, the Mandatory Reporter Statute requires certain workers to promptly report suspicion of child abuse to authorities. Those listed as mandatory reporters include doctors, licensed counselors, teachers, child care providers, and first responders.
Failure to promptly report to the authorities becomes a crime if the person willfully and knowingly failed to report.
However, excluded from being mandatory reporters are religious workers, such as pastors, priests, and ministers. For years, Kansas lawmakers have introduced legislation to require ministers and clergy to report suspected abuse. But Monnet says those efforts have been met with questions about violating the sanctity of private discussions within the church.
Traditionally, religious persons have been left out because there is a priest penitent privilege excluding from evidence anything disclosed, for instance, in a confession.
Monnet says without more information about who is involved in fact-finding ministries, we won't know much more about the investigation.
We would have to know who the interviewers were, would have to know what the relationship was between the religious entity or religious person and the interviewers and the investigators. I just think it just requires too much speculation to try to say how it works out.
Now, I did reach out to both Eastminster and to the Fact Finding Ministry group for information, but they have not commented back.
Last month, Eastminster's Board of Elders received the final summary report of the investigation conducted by the third-party group hired by the church. The church says this Sunday they will make that report available to church members and those involved in the investigation by appointment only. Also this Sunday, the organization Eastminster Truth will hold a press conference asking the church to immediately turn over its internal investigation to the appropriate law enforcement.